Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with Kurt Francom. He's not only a podcaster, but he's the author of Is God Disappointed in Me? And I'm going to ask him a couple takes on that title. Should God be disappointed in some who don't take religion seriously enough? And also, what about those who are disappointed in God? So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. And oh, by the way, I'm giving away 3 copies of autographed copies of Is God Disappointed in Me? From Kurt Francom. So sign up to gospeltangents.com/contest and you could win one of 3 autographed copies. So take it away, Kurt. Let me shift gears a little bit. And I had 2 thoughts when I looked at the book title that are variations on the title.
All right.
So I wanted to get
Here come the hard-hitting questions.
These are two sequels that I want you to write.
Okay. Perfect.
I'm trying to decide which one to go first. Let me ask you this one, especially since you're a former bishop, member of the stake presidency. Are there people in your ward or stake? I mean, I look at this as these are people who are really working hard and striving hard and they never feel like they can meet up. Are there other people that you are like, you know, that guy could try a little bit harder? God might be a little disappointed in that guy and he's not getting this whole repentance thing. What do you think about that?
Are there, so I guess the question...
So people who aren't taking their religion as seriously as they should, and maybe, you know, they're a little lax in their behaviors. Let's say it that way. Maybe they mow the lawn with no shirt. You know, because I know we're making a big deal about got to wear your garments.
I
all
don't
the
know.
time.
We were talking about serious sin.
Or people who maybe, you know, they go get drunk on Saturday night. They don't go to church. Or they go to church once in a while, but you know, they don't really take it very seriously. Yeah. Is there a type of member who maybe God is disappointed in that they don't take things as seriously as they should?
Yeah. So I guess with those, like the question comes up of, or how am I going to say this? Often people think, well, if God's not disappointed in us, then why do I feel so much disappointed? Because I mean, I'm the bishop, and I mean, half this congregation just doesn't get it, and then we project our feeling onto God. So God must be disappointed because I'm here every week. I'm here early. I give, you know, I'm here 10 hours every Sunday, and they're here maybe 1, right? And so then we project our expectations on the people. My argument with this book is like, well, okay, we might be disappointed because we're mortals and we can't, we're not all knowing. And so we have certain expectations for people and that falls short. But my argument is, so is God disappointed in him? Because some might say, well, God's all knowing. If he knows the beginning from end, and I know this is a theological debate that some have, some will say he is, some will say he's not. But even if he's not all knowing, let's say, we'll go.
You're a heretic.
But, well, I mean, I just want to go to like the argument that maybe someone will bring up. Imagine if God showed up in your ward and he's like, I will now bear my testimony about the atonement of Jesus Christ. Is he going to say, well, I sent my son and I really hope it works. I mean, I believe it works. Man, I'm really hoping when we get to the end of this that it works. No, like God believes it completely. He has a complete knowledge that what his son did was enough. And if it truly is enough, why would he, that leaves 0 space for him to be disappointed when we mess up. I share the story of when I witnessed my daughter taking the first steps. You know, she's 1 year old. Here she goes. She's walking. And guess what? She kept falling down. Did I look at her and be like, what's wrong with you? Like, why can't you figure this out? I mean, the Johnson's baby across the way, she walked at 9 months. And here we are at 12, 13 months, and you haven't figured this out? Like, maybe if I lecture to you a little bit longer. No, it was this beautiful interaction of, like, me going over to her, helping her up one more time, and, all right, here we go, keep walking, because I knew the potential in her was beyond any little trip up on the rug as I witnessed that. So we may be disappointed in people, and that is a very mortal experience. I just don't believe it's a divine, godly experience, because he's overcome that. So when he looks at us and sees us mess up, he's never thinking, well, great, now you're out of the reach of my son's atonement. He's like, no, keep going, right? And so that's the beauty of grace, is that he has no expectation of us, because Jesus fulfilled all expectation. And he invites us into commandments and covenants again, so that we can develop and become like him. So did I dodge your question? Give me another follow-up.
Well, it sounds like you're just saying God's not disappointed in anybody if we think God is. It's really us that are disappointed in them. They're not doing their home teaching, or they're ministering. I don't know why I keep going back to that. I'm just old school.
Yeah. Well, and then let me maybe I'm wrong, but do the math. Explain to me, if we believe in the God that the scriptures say and that our prophets have revealed, and the restoration and all that, if we believe in that God, do the math for me. How can God be disappointed? Is he all knowing? I think is that, I don't know, I would check with you. Is that a common belief? Would you say that's a understanding about the Latter-day Saint theology, that God is all knowing?
Oh boy, that's a coin toss there. Because we want to reject the Trinitarian beliefs about God, which is what that is. But yet we also want to embrace that we're not any different.
Would you be shocked in general conference if someone said God is all knowing?
I would not be shocked.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if that's the case, do the math for me. Okay, maybe he's not all knowing. Then is he worried that the sacrifice of his son didn't work?
No.
Right. So show me where the space of disappointment fits in, right? But we want it to, because here's why, Rick.
Well, people are going to point back to Noah and Egypt and, the Old Testament, Jericho, go kill all the people of Jericho.
Okay. Right.
And they're going to be like, I don't like that God.
Right. Yeah. But
you don't like him either.
I think that God is misunderstood, and in our mortal perspective, we're trying to understand why would he do that? We simply don't know. I think sometime we'll get to a place, because if my 11-year-old daughter tried to explain my character to somebody else and who I am and what I like, what I dislike, generally she could talk about me as her father, but she doesn't understand what it's like being a 41-year-old man and trying to support a family and do all these things. She doesn't know the depths of maybe depression I've experienced and things. She could not truly articulate why I am who I am. But here we are as mortals being like, well, it says right there, Rick, in the Old Testament, he's mad. So therefore he's disappointed. I think there's a lot more going on that we just don't understand. But when you look at the God in the New Testament, when he literally came to this earth and lived as he lived and gave everything and sacrificed, and then even the God in the how Jesus Christ talked about in the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants, to me, that's, if we take all that, I just do the math. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's a space there, but I don't see, the math doesn't work out for me, and it doesn't serve me. How, and some people do make the argument that there is sort of this benefit of having a disappointed God, because shame works. And if I know I have a God that's angry at me and he's coming for me, he's got the key to hell and he's going to lock me up forever. I'll start doing some temple work and ministering because I'm scared. But that's not the God that I understand, right? He's a God of complete love. And but oftentimes we want to resort to or fall back on shame, because guess what? Shame works, but it doesn't work like love works. It's more complicated to love like God loves.
Okay. So you're not going to do that sequel.
What's the sequel?
God is disappointed in me.
Oh yeah. Which is funny because I did find there's a book on Amazon called God is Disappointed in You.
Oh, really?
I actually bought it because I'm like, maybe I could do a package deal. You could.
Oh, really?
And it's more of a funny book about Bible verses or Bible stories, anyways. But,
okay.
So that book's already taken. It's written.
All right. So here's the other. Here's a sequel for you. This one's going to be very different, I think.
Okay.
Am I disappointed in God? Now, I'll tell you a story, but I don't think this is a unique story, but I know a good church member, and he was asked to give a blessing to somebody who was dying, and he felt the Spirit directing him to say, "You are going to live." And a week or two later, that person died. Mm-hmm. And it was a real struggle for my friend.
Yeah.
How do I reconcile this? I feel like God told me to say those words. I don't feel like they came from me. And so I'm a little disappointed in God.
Yeah.
And I think, let's see, shall I be autobiographical for a minute? Boy, I don't know if I want to
do it, Rick.
I may cut this out.
God won't be disappointed in you.
So once again, I was in college, met this girl who I thought was the girl of my dreams. She lived in Colorado. I felt inspired that I needed to proclaim my love to this girl.
Oh boy.
Drove
We've
all
all
the
been
way
there.
to Colorado. I even asked her if I should come, and she's like, sure, whatever. She did not feel the same way about me. And
this is hard to believe, Rick.
I know, exactly. And so this never happens to anybody. And so I will say that because of this and other experiences, you know, I've come to the conclusion that if I think God's striking me with a lightning bolt, probably better ignore it. Because I know you go to church, you hear people that are like, God inspired me to do this, and I did.
I found my keys, Rick. I prayed and I found my keys.
Or I mean, even more serious stuff. You know, General Conference are always talking about the person who's inspired. Whereas, and I know that I'm not unique here, and my friend is not unique, where you really feel like you're inspired, God's directing you to do something, and it turns out exactly the opposite from what your, for lack of a better word, vision was. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this girl thought I was a nice friend. She wasn't interested in me romantically. And I'm happily married now, so forget her. But anyway, you know, it's one of those things. I've often said, if a bolt of lightning strikes me, I'm not going to follow it because I don't trust God in that way.
Yeah.
So I guess I would be, and my friend would be, one of those people where, and there are even other people that are going to leave the church over these things, which I haven't done and my friend hasn't done. But I'm super skeptical of spiritual promptings. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that I don't have spiritual things happen. I'm just very skeptical.
Yeah.
So is that a sequel for you?
And I think I touch on some of these themes of, if someone came to me and said, well, what about me? What if I'm disappointed in God?
Right.
I would respond and say, that's okay. You know, and I get like, you know, we tell it in a lighthearted way and fun, but I probably in that moment, that was a devastating thing. Mm-hmm. And as a friend, I would love to just sit with you in that and recognize that hurt. And it felt like God hurt you in that. And you know, and then the thousands of other stories of like tragedy. Yeah. And
I think there are other stories where people are like, I felt blessed to rise up and walk, and they didn't.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that's really important to recognize those things do happen. And a lot of times I do sort of wince at times in church when somebody is telling that faith promoting story of finding the keys or, you know, whatever it is. And while, you know, down the pew is somebody who just lost a son or daughter to suicide, or, I mean, just some tragic stories. And so my response is, that's okay. Like, the beauty of this is like, and even if it causes somebody, like, you're so disappointed in God that it causes you to run from him and leave him, in as many ways you can. You see that happen often. Like, you can you can leave the church, you can leave God, but he will never leave you. Like, that's the beauty of his grace. That's the infinite character of his grace. And at some point, and God plays the long game. This is another place where maybe I separate from the Lutherans and others of that. There's this moment, well, if you don't get it figured out by then, like, sorry, game's over. Enjoy hell, right? Like, no, like the God we worship. I mean, Doctrine and Covenants 76 is so expansive. It reaches so many corners of eternity that there may be people who assume God is, or they're disappointed in God in this life, and they live their whole life, and at some point God will show up for them, and he will, and in Revelation, every tear will be wiped away, and we'll have complete understanding. But in the moment, I get that these answers may not help, and my heart just goes out to those people who feel disappointed in God. And I mean, my life hasn't been free from that experience either. But I think he's worth engaging with. And even if we don't want to engage with him, he will find a way to engage with us.
And I mean, I kind of told this with Steve Pineacre. I'll share it again. I remember, and I hate to keep going back to my mission, but that's where a lot of spiritual things happen. Right. That's our spiritual formation a lot of times. So I remember I was in South Carolina. We had a car, but we were limited on our miles, and so we had to stick close to home. And
I remember that game. Yep.
Where can we go so we don't use a lot of miles? Oh, there's this apartment over here. We gave some Book of Mormons away. Maybe we'll go there. And we went to this apartment complex, and it was definitely not a bolt of lightning. It was like, we're being pragmatic here. It's close to our place. We can check on 6 or 7 people all in one stop. Did not feel inspired in the least. So we pull into the parking lot. We see this woman, her name was Beverly, and she had a daughter, Kim, who was about 18. And Kim had wanted to join the church for years, I think since she was like 13 or 14, and her mom wouldn't let her because she had to be 18. And so she was 18 now, and we were like, and I remember we got out, and then Kim said, "Hey, elders, this is where I live," and we didn't know that, and so we're like, "Oh, wow." And so all those 6 or 7 people that we were there for, nothing happened.
Right.
But Kim was there, and Beverly told me this later, that when Kim said, "Hey, elders, this is where I live," and Beverly was like, "Oh, brother, I don't like Mormon missionaries." Uh-huh. Now they're going to start coming over. And I remember at the time I was like, because we'd heard Beverly was this awful person. She wouldn't let Kim get baptized. That's why she was awful. And so my thought was, hey, I'm going to get to know Beverly just to let her know that we're cool people, we're nice, and just kind of soften her up just so that Kim can be baptized. Well, the strangest thing, so we started teaching Beverly. I remember I was like, "Would you like to take the discussions?" And she said yes, and I about fell off my chair. I was like, this is not the awful lady I heard about. And then I remember it was weird because our second discussion, she's supposed to commit into baptism, and I was pretty sure she was going to say yes, even given this history. And she said no. And I was like, that's weird. Okay. Come back for the third discussion, felt prompted to do it again. She said no again. And I'm just like, something's not adding up. Fourth discussion was on the word of wisdom. Beverly's a smoker.
Oh boy, here it comes.
And so fourth discussion, and she already knew about the word of wisdom. Her daughter had told her all about it. She didn't need us to tell us about it. But anyway, I said, "Is the reason you said no because of the word of wisdom?" And she said, "Yes, that's why I said no."
Nice.
And so I think we tried to commit her again, and she said, "No, I'm a smoker, but I'm I'm going to try to quit. And so the weird thing was, I think I got a call that I was going to become a zone leader in a week.
Nice.
And so I called up Beverly and I'm like, if you're going to get baptized, you need to do it within a week because I'm leaving. And she quit smoking.
Nice.
But the amazing thing that blew me away in this story was that first day when I did not feel inspired at all to be there. We were just saving miles. After she saw us, Beverly went home, and she said she had a dream that night that 2 Mormon missionaries were sitting on her couch. And so when we came back a week later and we were sitting on her couch, she said she recognized us from her dream.
Wow.
And I was like, you are kidding me. And so I've often said the only way that I'm ever inspired is I don't feel anything. I don't know anything. If I feel something, it's wrong. But if I don't know anything, God uses me in his way. And then I find out later, oh, yeah, you were inspired to save miles those days.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can empathize a lot with your experience. You know, you ever meet the people who are just like, every day they're like, well, so I prayed about it, and I felt like I should do A, B, and C, and it worked out, and it was great. And so then the next day I had this question, I prayed about it, and I felt this, and you're just like, what planet are you from?
Yeah,
right?
No kidding.
And this is another doctrine I feel like we oversimplify, especially in a leadership realm where too many times we think, we need a Sunday school teacher, for the youth. And so we're going to come together as a bishopric and we're going to pray and a scroll from heaven will descend with a name on it. Right. And I call it the chalkboard in heaven fallacy, that God has this chalkboard in heaven and it has every calling in the ward, and next to every calling is a specific name. And it's our job as the bishopric to determine whose name is by every calling. And that's baloney. We are giving keys. And even Doctrine and Covenants 138 verse 9, it talks about like revelation's a two-way street. Sometimes revelation comes from heaven and where you feel prompted and inspired and we make a decision. Other times we just make a call, and if it's done in an orderly way with the priesthood and with the authority, it goes up to heaven stamped as revelation. So, for example, even in this book, it's not like or a better way to phrase it is I think back to my time as a bishop and the decisions I made and the choices or callings or things, the way I did, the way I led was influenced mainly by just life experience. Maybe an experience I had as a teenager and how that bishop treated me then or whatever. Or the story about me going to the bishop's office as a youth, like what was the fact that happened back then was maybe solely so I'd have a story today to put in my book that'll help other people, right? I don't think we really understand all the ways that God influences us, but it's easy to oversimplify it and say like, well, you'll just know, like you'll pray and you'll have a prompting. And I can tell you story after story of a prompting. I went down that street and I just felt like I should knock on that door, and dead end after dead end after dead end, right? But so what? It's so easy to be like, oh, well, I want to be the guy that can stand up and tell the story about I got the prompting and saved the world. It was awesome, right? And sure, I think we'll all have some of those stories throughout our lives. But again, we oversimplify and incorrectly frame a doctrine that it's not helpful to a lot of people.
So that's where I am at. I'm kind of like, if God directs me, I'm not going to know.
Well, and I would argue God is constantly directing you.
But I can't get the directions right.
No, that you are constantly getting the directions right. I mean, look at this body of work, Rick, that you've created. Like, at what point did you sit up in bed and be like, God is commanding me to start a podcast, and it's going to be called Gospel Tangents. I'm going to do this and this and this. But the lives you've blessed with this body of work are remarkable. People will show up to your funeral that don't even know you or you never met and think, this guy kept me in this church. This guy helped me understand so many doctrines, right? Is God in that? Or this is just the Rick show that you figured all this out? No, of course God is in this. Of course at some point when you had that idea to buy the mic and do the things, like God was in that, even though you didn't sit up in bed and be like, the Spirit is talking to me right now. Like that's how God works, you know?
Yeah. Well, very good. So you've already written that must be, because I only read about half of the book.
Well,
so.
and another thought that comes to mind along that is of a book I thought about writing is this concept of suffering, right? That there was some level of suffering that you experienced by driving out to Colorado and being friend zoned, you know? Mm-hmm. But there's sanctification in that suffering. Like it hopefully oriented you to God, right?
Let me tell you what made that trip even worse. So my best friend had a girlfriend from the exact same town. And so the three of us, me, my brother, and then Eric, we go out there to Colorado. He has the time of his life, and I'm just like blocked. And we went to see this, and I'm a huge Celtics fan. Celtics played the Nuggets in McNichols Arena. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish got blown out. Like it could not have been a worse trip. Yes. It was horrible. It was right as they were just done. Like I think Larry retired a year or two later. Like they were terrible. And honestly, I'm a huge basketball fan. And me and my brother is too. And we were like, this is the most boring game I've ever watched in my life. So it was a really terrible trip. Yeah. I suffered.
You did suffer, right? And again, talking about, you know, the more tragic experiences that people face in life and where they feel like, God, I'm disappointed in God. I'm sort of tired of this guy in the sky and I've had it. And I can just say, I'm sorry. But if you're suffering, like if you're feeling suffering, God is in that because he suffered it too, right? Like, and when we make that connection of like, wow, like God has felt this, like that's a very endearing experience to Jesus Christ.
So this is making me more like Jesus. Is that what you're trying to say?
Hey, those are your words, Rick, I guess.
I'm trying. See, God doesn't talk to me very well. That's why I got to ask you.
I think God speaks to you incredibly well. And someday you will fully understand how well he speaks with you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Kurt Francom, podcaster and author of Is God Disappointed in Me? In our next conversation, which is only available to newsletter subscribers, I'm going to ask him about whether girls should be able to pass the sacrament, and we'll also hit Christian nationalism.
We just need equality, and that is actually where we'll reach this level of nirvana that it'll be of strengthening community, and more people will be happy, and it'll function better, and church will be better because we'll have female bishops and all this, right? Okay, like that's...
And Community of Christ has a female prophet coming up here in a
That's right.
So they're the good example, right?
They are an example. I would not frame them as a strong example that they're okay. So
shots fired.
I love my Community Christ peeps, but
thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.